It was just a short little video for me to cut.
Oh.
What's up, fantasy fans? As always, I'm Shay from the channel Zachary Shay. If you're new here, this is going to be me posting my prologue and first chapter to my book, Requiem, Dreams of the Sleepless. This is a sort of steampunk, I guess, Lovecraftian epic fantasy. It's a standalone set in a world where I plan to have multiple standalones. We follow about 6 or 7 POV characters during this one night. The whole book takes place in one night, though there are a plethora of flashback chapters that permeate the text. It's a multiple act story. Each act you follow different characters' backstories, while the modern day sort of horror narrative progresses. And yeah, so I'll be playing Prologue in Chapter 1 right now. Requiem, Dreams of the Sleepless. Prologue. We all become dust, whether by raging flame or the slow decay of time. Not remains of us, but ash and dirt, scattered to time's merciless gale. Our stories are but a blink compared to the breadth of epochs, but they form our testimony against time's march, our stubborn resolve against the chaos of the realms, our middle finger to destiny, and our fuck you to fate. Daring reader, I do not wish to stifle your courage, for what do you mortals have if not your bravery, your defiance? It is perhaps these very traits that endears our kind to yours. Read on, but I will not have you go blind as the lamb before the shepherd's sharpened blade. If you have labored to find this tome, if you have deciphered this decrepit wizard's writing, penned in a language that was long forgotten before humanity's inception, then you deserve to know what type of story this isn't. If you track these pages down to glean the tale of how Ilriel's second son came to reside beyond the ocean of souls, you may find yourself unsatisfied by the words transcribed here. Second son of the moon, lord of night, and high prince of the starlings, each title a prison, each ill-bestowed expectation a weight upon his half-mortal shoulders. Yet even the greatest of those expectations weighs far less than the many burdens of his slaughtered people. But that story is not mine to recount, nor will I attempt it. If you have devoted your life to languages, resigned years of your brief existence to the etymology of elven tongues, all to transcribe this account in the hopes that you may learn of the fate of the sea goddess they once worshipped, I will relieve you of those assumptions before you waste any more of your precious time. Aliel's fate is unknown even to my sorcery, and though the turning of millennia have lessened my empathy for mortals despite my desires to the contrary, I cannot help but spare a moment of regret for the last mortal to hold a sliver of the elf goddess's power. Her temper was torrential, rage frothing like waters before the storm, Aja's last warrior princess. For those inquisitive enough to find these pages intact and with the knowledge requisite to read them, if we were to meet, you might recall to me one such inquisitive mind. She was a monster, and though this is not her story, she does feature in the telling. War makes monsters or corpses of each of us, and none know this better than the consul that bled for the nation that butchered her brothers and stretched the neck of her father. A woman scarred by loss and scorched by fire will seldom shy away from the things that need to be done. But the allure of power is like a flame to the moth, and the insect cares not for the flare's scorching touch. And lastly, for those few who think they have stumbled upon some great and noble epic, something to be sung around a tavern merry with drink and warmed by hearth fire, I warn this is no minstrel's account you find between your mortal hands. I wish this was some bard's tale, where our heroes escape whole and hale. Alas, not all tales can be so civil as all such fairy tales and drivel. There is a bard in this story, though I wish he could have been spared his part in everything that came to pass. Enough about what this story is not. It is time I told you what it is, and all stories must have a beginning. It is hard to discern where this story begins, as it is with all stories. Nothing ever truly begins, and take that from one who was there when the continents were called forth from the bottomless oceans. Every story and every beginning has arisen from what has come before. I choose to begin our tale with the courier's mission. Moira carried a message meant to stop an assassination that would see the Veyron Empire shattered. It was a missive that might have spared the life of an indulgent and apathetic despot at the cost of saving many innocent lives. She entered through the east gate near the Luzic district of Larnia's third tier. It was expected for inbound riders to stable their mounts before entering the city proper, but no guard would stop a member of the Emperor's Couriers Guild adorned in the uniforms of black and gray. Crowds of commoners congested streets simmering with an ill-won peace, bought and paid for with the deaths of Eastern children. I won't waste parchment apologizing for either of my brother's faults. Wars and causes will crop up wherever you find two peoples separated by a river. That doesn't mean I don't lament the loss. Though as I have told you before, my empathy is a commerce that has been spent through the years, and it is very seldom that I can find myself paying such fees of late. She whistled to get the crowd's attention, and they scattered at her warning, wary of trampling hooves. She made her way to Larnia's first tier, but before she reached the gates, she was sidetracked. A whispering murmur drew her down an alley littered with refuse. Some of the back ways so narrow that the mare barely fit, and the mount tried to back out many times, but the whisper in Moira's head insisted upon the path. The tavern sign displayed a dead man with a noose necklace. The signage's poorly rendered image was accompanied by 4 scrawled words: "The hangman's last respite." The courier's bladder burned, and long miles on dusty roads built up a thirst in her that cried out for cold beer. She threw the reins over the railing surrounding the patio outside the tavern's entrance, tying a half-hearted knot before she entered the threshold. She looked back at her mare, the need to release reaching a painful state. If the horse had issue with her lack of decorum, she didn't voice her concerns. Being a courier, Moira very seldom relied upon the hospitality of taverns. The guild house lodged her as part of her salary. However, since her drunken tussle in the sheets with her superior, the one-time home had felt all too unwelcoming. "I think I am in love with you." His voice had been lilting, and the use of the word think did little to hide his overbearing adoration. He had been flirtatious and mildly charming, and she had been more than mildly drunk, so she had instigated the casual dalliance. She laughed at his comment in an attempt to make it less real, but when she looked at his withering countenance, her eyes perceived a pain made all too tangible. He joined in the laughter, but his eyes were mirthless, miserable. They hadn't spoken since then, aside from him issuing her various assignments. Opening the door to the tavern, the courier felt a sharp and intense stab of pain, as if a needle were plunged into her cerebrum. Upon her recovery, she was greeted with a yellow light that just barely kept the pervasive twilight from without at bay. The embers in the hearth were only the warm remnants of the heat that had all but died. She felt the weight of the imperial missive in her coat pocket. If a courier were to lose a sealed document, or worse, deliver the message with the wax unicorn sigil broken, their life would be forfeited without a modicum of ceremony. The tavern was empty save the silent bartender methodically polishing the oaken bar. On a night like this, it should have seemed odd that no patron sat at any of the tables. And yet Moira's discontentment was quieted by the soft hum of music that sounded to her ears like the forgiveness of her uncountable transgressions. She sat at the bar and opened her mouth to ask for a cold beer, intent on ordering her drink before she relieved her bladder grown heavy from hours in the saddle. The bartender sheathed 9 inches of steel through her right eye and out the back of her skull. "One beer, please," and Moira said calmly as blood gushed from her eye and she emptied her bladder on the tavern's floor. The bartender, that was not a man, reached into her coat and retrieved a missive sealed with the sigil of the Veyron unicorn. With a precise flick, he flung the envelope in the ever-dying hearth fire. That done, the creature wiped away the girl's gore before folding the rag into a neat square. Careful 3-fingered hands creased the cloth into crisp corners clean, save the marring of courier's blood. Using the unbloodied side, he continued polishing the bar. Part 1. Greetings at Dusk. Chapter 1. The Dead Don't Draw Crowds. The Hangman's Last Respite. Location unknown. Docks, 3rd tier of Larnia. Savandril and Savik, 104 CVL, Night of the Requiem. When setting out to kill an adversary, be prepared to stand guard against a dozen more where that enemy once stood. Ivor of Veyra, the Black Knight. What am I doing here? Civ reproached herself, tired eyes drawn to the tavern's looming placard, an image made ominous by the macabre attempt at artistry. The thin piece of plied lumber, fastened to the side of the building by finely worked brass rings, displayed the decayed countenance of a corpse, blood-red X's splayed over jaundiced eyes. She spared few thoughts on how such a grim image would attract willing patrons. That last thin shred of Aliel's soul warned against the faint draw of the encircled building. The dead goddess's resonance was a soft voice against the whispery fog of the den's demonic allure. Part of her was in accord with Aliel, that small piece of her that still loved Davernon, despite all the pain he had wrought. The sliver of her that still hoped she might see Ara's lavender eyes in more than her own memories. The fractured pieces of her that looked at Samali and didn't see a monster lurking beneath the thin mask of a man. She swallowed her doubts, only added to the torrential pit of burning memories. While she walked her isolate path, her mind's eye lingered on the image of Samali and Kip in Tulanin, reveling another safe return to home port. But Larnia wasn't home, nor the empire that birthed her. Years spent trading with the Veyrons only served to numb losses as irreparable as severed limbs. The Empire had taken everything from her, and against Lynn's remonstrations, they would pay dearly. What do you mean you don't know? The soft sway of the waters did little to distort the bloated question. Exactly what I fucking said, you old cod. Irritation ignited by the realization that his derisive tone had been justified. She scratched at the incessant itching along her scalp. Calloused fingers came away stained the black color of moonless twilight. Profuse perspiration mingled with squid ink, used to mask the auburn locks that would draw imperial ire. You don't fucking know who he was, and you're still dead set on going. The first mate held out his hand. Arthritic fingers should have looked frail to her eyes, and yet they carried a strength harder than Veyron iron. He withdrew his weathered hand when he realized she would not relinquish the note to his outstretched palm. She clutched it like a secret, her grip vice-like. He told me he could get the bitch's head. Her eyes darted down to her hand, which held the piece of vellum, before rising to meet her mate's vacant gaze. The bitch in question needed no clarification. The consul. You should have told him to go fuck himself, Captain. The use of her title did little to blunt his rebuke. You should have had the boys cast off the second he recognized you. You do well to remember whose ship this is, as if they weren't standing within the captain's cabin. And you would do even better to remember who's kept your damn feet planted on the quarterdeck through the years. You think I don't fucking know that? It was not a question. Her tongue felt caustic, venom spewed at the one person who saw past her walls. What did Samily say? He fished that damn flask from his coat. She bit down her order to cease his drinking aboard her ship. 2 decades of telling the old man that he couldn't drink on her vessel had yet to yield results. Even when she confiscated the damn dregs, he always found more, as if his coat pocket housed his own demonic domain of liquor. Silence enveloped the narrow space between 2 friends. You didn't tell him. Any attempt at veiling his admonishing observation as a question died on his aged lips. No, he wouldn't have let me go alone. 'Cause the big bastard's got fucking sense, unlike you. Watch yourself, old man. A rage rarely seen since her youth showed its ugly head. My tolerance for insubordination only reaches so far. Hell, tie my insubordinate ass up and throw me overboard for treason for all the dry fucks I give. Decorum can suck my half-rotted cock, and I would go bound into Aliel's depths before I let you walk down this path. My father's dead, Lynn, and you're a poor substitute. Her eyes didn't shy away from his burned face, in his seeing eyes the milk white of cream, pupils opaque. He met her gaze, his resolve unwavering despite the irreparable damage to his vision. Don't do this, kid. You'll lose yourself. I don't need my sight to see that, and I've lost enough friends to last a lifetime. His rebuking tone replaced by disquiet sorrow. Disquiet ebbed to true quiet and back once more as he spoke words she wasn't ready to hear. They're gone. Dead. Not coming back. Her response was not one of words, the sharp crack of the spyglass rebounding off lumber. It had been mere inches from colliding with the blind man's skull, though he didn't flinch. The sip he took from his flask made her tantrum feel all the more febrile, and she felt a sharp stab of shame at her poorly vented rage. At 20, her fiery disposition had been charming, electrifying even. She was twice the age of the girl that warred against empire, and rage is far less appealing in those wizened enough to know better. I feel their loss too. Blind fingers grasping for her arm with an intent to give comfort to a pain that could never be lessened. You have no fucking clue what loss is. Her speech cracked, and in that brief instant she heard Ara's voice in her own words. I've seen how this goes, Captain. It isn't the way you think. Did you see Davernan's betrayal? Ara burning to dust? Scorn dripped from her tongue. You didn't say anything then. When his feet remained planted after her rebuke, she stormed from her own cabin, refusing to let the old man be party to her tears. Shutting her cabin door behind herself, she leaned against the salt-stained oak and exhaled as her body, grown heavy under the weight of her friend's truthful admonishment, slumped. Arthritic knees creaked, the reward for her years of war against the Vayrens. Captain. The clear pronunciation revealed the speaker immediately. Kip, she greeted the youth, legs tightening as she retrieved her composure. How much did you hear? The boy seldom spoke, and when he did, it was with a cold, cadaverous neutrality. Enough. His loyal gaze recalled to her the name her crew bestowed on him. Civ's shadow. In the 5 years since she had plucked the kid out of that viper's nest, he had kept any and all opportunistic knives from reaching her flesh. Don't follow. The killer in her wanted to keep that order unspoken, but she was not so enamored with vengeance that she would risk the boy's life. If she got what she wanted this night, the Empire would never stop hunting her. Lynn would watch over the rest of them. She could only hope the shadow would serve the blind fucker as well as he did her. I won't be a burden. his high varen sharp and clipped, lending his speech an air of mature intelligence. Maturity betrayed by the cracking of his final spoken word, revealing the insecurity he kept guarded with deadly grace. Never that, Kip. The part of her that once thought she could be a mother wished to speak the words, but she spoke with the captain's voice. Follow me and you're off my ship. I don't give a fuck if you don't have anywhere to go. I can't abide insubordination. He spared her a stare verging upon recalcitrant, before convalescing to her command. Perhaps it would be easier to let his last memory of her be one of dissatisfaction, to separate the shadow as if with a hot surgical knife. The child cut from her body malformed. Samily never reaches his limit for drinking partners. Eyes the cold and blue of sweating glaciers met hers of hard iron. Watch their back for me? They've been cooped up for too long, and this city is a boiling pot set to froth. He nodded agreement before slinking away, steps as silent as the grave of his many vanquished adversaries. Some roads are too narrow for good company. Vengeance is one such path, and it must be walked alone. She clutched within her coat pocket a piece of vellum with 3 words and an image of a corpse with a noose around its neck. She was pulled away from her recollection by the exhalation of a frustrated mare. How the creature had eluded her perception, Siv couldn't say. Her experience with the hoofed quadrupeds was so limited that the creature could have been some beast out of myth. Hello? In response, the creature neighed with an intensity that conveyed disrespect more clearly than any foul-mouthed sailor's poorly slung slur. Well, fuck you too. She spat out a clump of mucus at the beast's hooves. She spared not a thought for which slight upon the beast her royal tutors would have found more egregious. Her long stride brought her past the beast as her hand found the cold iron of the tavern's door handle. Strident steps by inhuman feet summoned a solicitous step back. She turned about to eye the creature, and when she met her gaze she recalled how much Ara loved the damn things. Fuck. Her prior examination of the creature had been incomplete, her compassion mired by cold purpose. It was terrified, its innate instincts primed for preservation, toiled against the reins that held it to the tavern's rail. Even with the veteran sailor's ignorance for equestrian care, Siv knew better than to tie the creature to the railing by its reins. Any practiced rider would know to tie her up using a halter and lead. Cursing the rider's negligent nature, she severed the knot with her sharpened knife blade. The creature cast its gaze at Siv, only briefly before galloping down 2 narrow alleys. Standing in isolation in the wake of the spectacle, she let her mind wander as to how the creature found itself in some back alley in Larnia's second tier. Life is an assortment of steps. You cannot carve a path standing still. And even if the road leads to death, even if your boot prints are colored crimson, and your steps leave naught but blood and salt in your wake, is that not better than the tepid trail chosen by those too stagnant to take the first step? Siv, captain of Verity's wastrel, shard of Aliel, last daughter of Aja, the demon bitch. She of many names pulled upon that tavern door and stepped through the accursed entrance. The signpost swayed, though no wind coursed through the lifeless back alley. A morbid reminder of the path she chose. One step over the threshold almost brought her to her knees. Her ration, equal to that of her crew, spewed from her mouth. Bile and biscuit burned as they ejected from her throat. The shard of Aliel felt the weight of sorcery. Her hand made to block the path of the half-dissolved food in the acidic saliva. She flung her hand, scattering vomit along the ancient wooden floors. Oh, the toils of youth, to be drunk before the night has even reached its crux. An enviable luxury. A man's raspy voice, accompanied by the sound of crushed ice being tossed between glasses, was instantly recognizable to any sailor that had visited a port town bar, even a ship captain sworn to sobriety. My youthful toils are well behind me. Her hands found her wobbly knees, and she took a moment to reorient before wiping the bile from her lips. By a couple decades at least. Her gaze met his, and her hand stood ready to draw her weapons. To think of 20 years as some great stretch of time. The man smiled ruefully as he poured a clear liquid into a glass filled with perfectly frosted ice as if from the Novronian hills. Such thoughts only served to substantiate my spoken words. He sipped from his clear beverage of crushed ice. He was bald and aged, though not as old as Lynn, and handsome. His voice was smooth as bee's honey despite its raspy quality. Everything about him made her feel like she could let her guard slip. Her hands relaxed from the ready stance she usually kept. She felt a soft giggle resonate deep within herself, born a joy that knew not the loss of the man she loved. What the fuck? What the fuck is happening to my head? Her raised voice thrummed with Aliel's pulse, and the fog dispersed. Is everything all right? The bald man asked, his smile that had seemed so soothing now setting her on edge. Peachy, she snarled. Her eyes searched the room, never straying from the bald-headed barman. A slight but tall woman appeared to be slumped over the bar, intoxicated past the point of consciousness. Her body corpse still aside from the intake and exhalation of air, the cadence of those claimed by deep sleep. A smell like sour piss radiated from the woman, and as much as Siv wished to condone the poor woman, she had been young and stupid once. Aside from the wastrel, the room proved vacant, the contract from the docks noticeably absent. It was only when her eyes tracked back to the man behind the bar that she took note of his cassock. Priest garb stylized for travel, this was no high bishop's venerable vestment. The whites and blacks of the Holy Order were replaced by muted browns and greens. Though the coloring and fabric varied, the emblem of Hakaya, the great worm, was emblazoned beneath the man's collar. He reached into the front pocket sewn into his cassock, and Siv's right hand found itself upon her weapon's grip. When his hand emerged, it held no weapon, but a tiny pink flower dusted with pollen white as the ash that remained after lavender flame. A healing flower for the ailing beauty? He offered her the bloom, stem held delicately between index and thumb. She met his gaze, and her lip curled in disdain for the dandy's offered gift. No? He shrugged before popping the bulb of the flower, and the audible pop sounded like the breaking of soap bubbles, and as she blinked she saw in that brief instant the image of that Ajahn bathhouse. Back in the present, the priest dropped the flower into his clear drink and colored the frothing liquid amber, the swish of frosted liquor reminding her of the tide crashing against shallow waters. Pox Lily. The man's words brought her from the shallow shore back to deep waters. She slunk to the bar, her hand never straying from her weapons. She sat on the stool of oak that appeared so fragile as to break beneath her weight. She did not respond to the bald man's words. Unperturbed, the insipid priest sipped his amber concoction before elaborating. King Redding of Riala once commissioned a crown wreathed with these beauties. Royal coffers were drained to commission court artisans with the sole task of crafting a mold for the crown. Servants scoured the highlands, plucking the most beautiful blossoms they could find in the hope that the king might be content with their selections. To garner the favor of the oppressor, such a thing could mean the end of suffering, of hunger. Grown fatigued by the stranger's philosophizing, the captain of Verity's wastrel spoke. Have you seen a man my age, slight, barren, dangling emerald stud in his left ear? She asked after the man from the docks, and she issued a more detailed description than she had offered Lynn. But you might wonder why a king would go to so much trouble, or at least why he would demand so much trouble from those beneath him. The priest placed the half-empty glass before her and eyed her form beseechingly. No thank you. Poison came to mind despite the man's ingestion of the liquid. Poisoners built up a fix for their many concoctions, though that was not the reason she declined. She answered truthfully, I don't drink. The look contorted upon the countenance of the holy man was one of perplexion, though his recovery was swift, for he persisted through his tale. It was for the love of a bought woman. The dowry did little to open the young bride's heart, and even less to open her legs. Some kings wouldn't bristle or resort to bargaining at such a challenge. Siv's response resounded through the disquiet tavern, and the woman slumped over the bar, moved but an inch. Or she remained still, the ship captain's perception severely sullied by a pervasive fog. Not all despots subscribe to the same manner of deprivation. For all his faults, young Redding was a romantic. The man spun the glass before her, his index finger flicking the glass so that it remained in place as it spun. Did it work? Her question conjured a smile from the older man's thin lips. Did the boy king's petty crown open the girl's legs? Siv leaned in to better hear the man's story. Aliel cried out for caution, and a reflexive reach for her pistol's grip was assuaged by a demonic dominance. More than worked. The king seated her within a fortnight, and she was with child before the blood waning of Luxa. She was full of breast and round with child when the season turned. The winter of Plinia's cursed tears. The man rubbed at his pate with calloused hands, and his eyes were overcast by mournful clouds. Plague lashed the kingdom and left many with skin scoured by disease. He drew his forefinger to the remnants of the once beautiful flower. The Veyran mediciner informed the towns of Riala that this pox lily could be crushed into a poultice that could soothe the symptoms of the illness long enough for the body to recover. But the king had picked the flowers to near extinction, all for a frivolous gesture. Siv met the dour details with a pregnant silence, disquiet save for the shard within that cried out in agony against oppressive sorcery. Diseased hands wielded torch and crossbow just as competently as would the healthy. He lifted his hand away from the still spinning glass and tugged lightly at the cassock's collar. The hearth fire's dim light glimmered off the scar tissue, tracing the man's collarbone. Redding and his queen? Her question colored by the melancholy premonition of the story's resolution. The desperate and diseased cracked open the resin crown wreathed with pox lily. He shoved the glass over the bar and it crashed near her booted feet. You would have a better time drinking from that glass than from finding a damned cure in that crown. Jovial musing cut short by the grim edge of the priest's ire. The damned Veyran Mediciners Guild contrived the illness and the story that killed the Rialan royals. Sooner or later, the Veyrans always achieve what they desire. Her words were iron cold and just as hard. Aliel's pulse brushed the fog away, and the captain of Verity's wastrel was beyond fatigued from the man's lack of answers. Long and hard and arduous is the way out of hell, and it is not tread with trepidation. It is not achieved out of apathy, and it is not beholden to the timid. Her hand found her weapon's grip when the door of the tavern creaked open. Alright, thank you guys. I appreciate it if you've stayed till now. So that is Prologue in Chapter 1. First of the month for August, I will try to release Chapter 2. And then, I'll go ahead and keep releasing one chapter a month until, the book comes out, and then you'll get all the chapters. It's going to be like a roughly 50 chapter book. I say roughly because a lot's getting cut and a lot's getting rewritten. So what is, 60 chapters in my current draft may not be 60 chapters by the time the thing's done. So it's been a lot of fun writing it, and I'm hoping to get the finished version to y'all by fall 2026. So thank y'all. Peace.